ramp back up on Monday. It's expected to be the state's last week of presenting evidence for their case in chief in front of this jury. Reporting in Portland, Oregon, Julia Janae with Court TV.
All right, still with us, we have criminal defense attorney Kirk Nurmi joining us. So, Kirk, you know, really, the prosecution has a lot of helpful facts here. They don't have a murder weapon directly linking Nancy Brophy to this crime. That said, how do you think they're doing overall?
Well, I think they're doing great. I mean, this is a circumstantial case. We have to be upfront and frank with the jury about that. If you're the state, say these are all the circumstances, and you know you have the article about murdering your husband, and you have all the other facts, and you have one thing that I think was the most important piece of evidence we heard was Miss Brophy herself calling in to the detective wanting this letter of exoneration so she could collect on the insurance policy. It ties into their motive, and it ties into the idea that somebody, the defendant, is exploring whether or not she truly is a suspect or not. I'm guessing that was the whole ruse for the call, and it ties in perfectly for the state. And I think that's going to be huge evidence for the defense to try to overcome when they present their case.
Yeah, and she did pen the essay, How to Murder Your Husband, but ultimately the judge ruled that the jury's not going to get to see it and actually even know about it. But still, you know, the narrative can be presented in a different way. You mentioned the life insurance issue. So to be clear with our viewers, it was more than $1.5 million in insurance and workers' comp payments that Nancy stood to gain from her husband's death. And we mentioned there was an insurance expert who actually analyzed her insurance policies. I want to play a clip from his testimony. His name is Steven Santos.
In a normal planning mode for retirement, longevity risk is real, like outliving your money. So sometimes you have to say enough. And where does that lie, right? And that could be different. But I think in this case, it's definitely an outlier for me in what I've seen in planning circles.
And would you say in this particular case that for a couple who was planning a long-time retirement plan, that this setup and situation with the different policies makes any financial sense?
No. I mean, it's one of those things where, you know, we're robbing Peter to pay Paul.
Wow, Kirk, when you hear that, that's pretty strong for the state, right?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it goes into their narrative, their motive, right? And we hear, again, going back to the tape, we heard her pursuing that $40,000, even though it was chump change compared to the rest of the $1.5 million. So we see the unreasonableness of the actions. You tie that in with all the circumstantial evidence, and that's why I go back to the idea, and it appears Ms. Brophy's going to testify. She's going to have to do very well if she wants to walk away from this without being a convicted murderer.
Yeah, it's really incredible. I mean, some of the other details, the year that Dan Brophy died, they spent some $16,000 paying out insurance premiums, yet they were $6,000 behind in their house payments at the time. Now, Nancy has said she wanted to invest in insurance because she knew that she had health problems. So she wanted to protect her husband if something happened to her. Is that believable at all?
Well, you know, she can proffer any explanation she wants to, but it doesn't sound very believable when you're talking about being behind on your mortgage, right? I mean, food and shelter are number one more than any future considerations of that $1.5 million. So I think that really it's going to be, again, a tough sell because it doesn't make sense to a lot of people when you talk about a mortgage versus paying a life insurance premium. Regardless of anybody's consistent state of health, if you don't have a home to live in, it's not going to matter much. And is, you know, when she gets up there on the stand, I think the state is going to cross-examine her on exactly those issues.
Yeah, and we're running out of time here, Kirk, but real quick, I just wanted to ask you, the defense is planning to introduce some racy text messages between Nancy and Dan showing that they were still physically intimate, and I guess implying that, you know, she really loved her husband. Do you think that that could be effective, or do you think it looks desperate?
Well, you know, it's going to really depend on the context, but they're going to try to attack motive, right? And, you know, that might be the only way they have to do it. So it might be desperate, but it might be the only card they have to play.
Fair enough. Kirk Nurmi joining us live for analysis. Still ahead, the former Olympic equestrian charged with attempted murder found not guilty by reason of insanity. Did the jury get it right? Here's what the defense says.
This is one of the worst verdicts in history. There was temporary insanity in the courtroom, and it was with the jury. That was the temporary insanity. This was the worst miscarriage of justice since the O.J. trial.